Yo, guys, it's Kyle coming at you from Bane's Film Reviews. Today, I am sitting down with Nick DeKay, the director and producer of the Ark of Lilburn, which is a fantastic documentary. This is the first director or person, filmmaker I've had from a documentary, so that's exciting. I'm excited to ask you some questions about that side of filmmaking, and thanks so much for sitting down with me. It's a day after Christmas. I know you're busy. We just talked about some of the BS we've had to deal with in the past few days, but we're here and I'm happy to have you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Of course, of course. Yeah, we were just talking about flat tires and kidney stones and all those other fun things that shouldn't happen now, but happen at the worst possible time. Uh,
Yep.
but before we get into the actual film, I had a couple questions about you and your career and things like that. So my first one was just how did you get into filmmaking in the first place, and then how did you make that transition from stuntman to director?
Okay. So I guess in 2008, a filmmaker in Atlanta came by a gym I was working at. Well, I owned it, but I was also working there. And he said, "Hey, I want to use your gym to film a sequence in my movie in." And I was like, "Yeah, man, that's cool, but you got to put me in your movie." And he was like, "Well, do you know anything about acting or anything?" I'm like, "Nope, but I can fight." And he's like, "Well, incidentally, I have a part for a guy who can fight and don't have to say much or do anything. Just fight a guy and chase him." I was like, "All right, man, that's cool. Well, you put me in your movie, you can use my gym." So he put me in his movie, and I met some other guys working on the movie that are stunt guys now too. And we ended up becoming buddies. And I was like, "Man, this is really cool." And because before that, I never really thought about being in film. Just the
Mhm.
idea of it seemed a little preposterous. Like I figured you had to be somebody's kid to
Yeah,
get in. You know, like your uncle needed to be Francis Ford Coppola or something in
yeah,
order to join the industry. I didn't realize there was any openings available for non-nepotism hires.
yeah.
Um, but I was wrong. You can't get in and do stuff, I suppose. Um, so I kept after it. Did a bunch of like really bad like reality TV shows as plants where um it's reality, but
Yeah.
I was told what to do. Like I wasn't a contestant. Like I was on BET's Hell Day, which I thought was funny, but I was basically told to punk somebody
Okay.
um as a kickboxer or boxing instructor or something like that. um I kept banging my head against the wall until eventually I started making a living as a stuntman.
Cool.
um yeah. And then the pandemic happened, everything shut down. I had
Mm.
started directing shorts about 7 years ago. Um, and pandemic happened, everything was shut down. So all the shows we were working on suddenly just all packed up and went home.
Yeah.
And I wrote a pilot, and then I wanted to do a proof of concept for it. So we went to this steel shop, Porter Steel, which is the subject of the movie, and to film a sequence from this proof of concept I did. And we get there, and Cole, who's the son of the guy who built the boat,
Mm.
goes, "Hey, man, you got to see the boat. It's in the other room." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, whatever." I'm not really concerned about the boat because I'm on a mission, and I'm using his steel shop as kind of a weird location for two people to kill each other.
Hmm.
Um, so he's like, "No, no, you got to see the boat." So finally we walk in, and what I imagined was like a dinghy or maybe like a 25-foot boat ended up being 100,000 pounds of steel sitting in the
Yeah.
middle of a building, fully encapsulated. Like you can't. I was like, "Oh," and it was bigger than the door. I was like, "Well, this is weird." And so my business partner Jay, who's the other producer on the movie, um, we're like, "Man, this is really cool. If you ever decide to move it, let us know. We'll film it." And he's like, "Okay." And so we go about, film our proof of concept and leave. And then a little while later, Jay calls me and goes, "Hey, man, we're serious about that moving thing. If you decide to move it, we're gonna film it. Like, you just gotta let us know." And he was like, "I really want to move it. I hate the thing. I want it out of here. um just I got to get my dad to move it." He's like, "Well, let's all have dinner, Jay." This is Jay. It's like, let's have dinner and see if we can get you guys to move this thing.
Mhm.
So we have dinner, and Lowe decides, okay, well, he's going to pull the trigger on moving it. So we, crewed up and filmed the shenanigans.
Yeah. It,
And well,
it was very much a film of shenanigans.
oh yeah,
And, and so and then before I like really get into the nitty gritty, I have a bunch of questions about the actual film and that process. What's
yeah.
the difference? There's obvious differences, but what's it from your standpoint? What are the differences between directing a narrative versus directing a documentary?
Um, well, directing a narrative, assuming you have a competent director, um, the movie is mostly made in pre-production. It
Mm,
is, you know, you you spend a lot of time crafting the script, and then you take that script and it becomes the blueprint for your department heads. And in pre-production, the movie is built, so to speak.
yeah,
And then during actual production, you make the movie, but theoretically, if you prepped right, um, you know, you have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen on the day. I mean, obviously, you have to pivot for things that happen.
yeah,
Could be raining on a day you didn't want it to rain or whatever. Um, or perhaps, the talent doesn't deliver what you hope they would deliver, or they deliver
right.
something completely different that ends up being better. But
Okay.
in any event, so much of it is done there.
Yeah.
And you know the story going in. You've got the script in your hand, so every day the story you're trying to tell. um with a documentary, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into.
Right.
Story I thought I was going to tell, when we started doing the prep for this, has very little to do with the story that I ended up telling.
Okay.
um I didn't know Lowe and Cole at all, when I started filming, so I didn't know anything about them, their personalities. I didn't know anything about the people who worked there. Um, we went in. We knew that they had this big thing and they were going to move it, and it was like, haha, look, I'm going to do my Werner Herzog movie. But I didn't know anything about what was going to happen, and
Yeah.
even 30 days in filming this thing, because we ended up doing, I think, 34 days total.
Wow.
Um, yeah, because just, I mean, you saw in the movie how long it took.
Yeah.
So we would, we had it in our mind originally. We were going to go in there, do some interviews with the various employees, maybe talk to some people that worked on the boat, move the thing over a weekend, and then we thought we'd be wrapped with production, uh, you know, maybe the week after Halloween,
Okay.
and be out of post by December, ready to deliver it in January. And, we didn't even wrap production until the end of February because of all the
Wow.
stuff that
Yeah.
happened. So I was, you know, grabbing guys like, hey, something's going to happen on Tuesday, guys. And it's Monday, of course. Um, who's available tomorrow to come with me to film stuff? And it became one of those games,
Yeah.
because obviously it dragged out over months instead of being kind of encapsulated in 3 weeks.
Mm,
Um, but and even when we're like even when we're moving the boat, like for all I knew, the boat could have fallen over on the side of the road and been a
yeah.
very different story.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
we were deep in post before we really had the narrative crafted.
Okay.
Because we had, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 hours total of footage.
Wow.
Yeah, it ended up being, I think, 140 terabytes total.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
yeah, I've got these three massive RAID arrays that they're all on.
How,
Um,
how do you go about deciding what makes a cut with 400 hours worth of content?
so um, I had Carly, this woman who's my script supervisor. She she saved my ass big time.
Okay.
She gave me, I have like a 200-page PDF, from her, from when I was doing interviews and when stuff was going on, and she's just writing stuff.
Okay.
So I used a lot of that stuff to be like, okay, I know this moment happened on this day, so it's somewhere this mess of footage.
Yeah.
Um, and we spent, weeks just watching footage, looking for stuff, and we started categorizing it. And I want to say it probably took us 2 months of just watching footage and categorizing it to get it
Mm.
somewhat organized into where it needed to be. And that was probably 2 months. And then from there, it took, you know, another 2 or 3 months to take that and come up with an initial like assembly of stuff. And then it
Mm.
just took, I think we were in post for almost a year.
God.
Uh, yeah, it was tough. Um, you know, it was, we would just sit there in the room 8, 10 hours just going through footage. Like, okay,
Right.
you know, and then, and then eventually we were able to kind of get it together, get this narrative together. I mean, I think the cut that I originally screened to people was probably close to 3 hours.
Okay.
Because there's so much more that happened, but we just ran out of time. It's like
Yeah.
nobody wants to watch a 3 hour documentary from a unknown filmmaker. There was some really funny stuff in it, like Pat, the ponytail guy.
Mm.
Um, I have this long conversation I had with him about him uh, being at the Capitol on January 6th, and and it was a super awkward, really funny conversation that couldn't. It's like it's him at a restaurant just eating, and like his wife and his employer just kind of like looking off like this, trying to avoid eye contact with him as he talks about being at the Capitol. It was really funny.
Oh my
But
God.
it didn't make the cut, but I thought it was hilarious. But it was in one of them. I had just this weird thing of Pat, you know, just talking about that, and then saying the only reason he didn't go actually storm the Capitol is because he forgot his bulletproof vest and he had to pee. It's like, this is fantastic.
That's good. That's good stuff. But I mean, everything that made it into the film was hilarious. I mean, you don't often find a documentary that's funny all the way throughout. And the people on screen are like larger than life. You expect somebody to sit down and just kind of tell their story, and if it comes out bland, it comes out bland because that's the reality of the
Yeah.
situation. But everybody just has these massive personalities and don't really care about what they say on camera. And I, I again, this feels very different than other documentaries because they appear to be so comfortable in front of the camera. But is that a struggle at any point, making sure that they're being as honest as possible and not changing their opinion a little bit or not changing the way they phrase things because there's a camera sitting in front of them?
Um, I spent hours interviewing all the guys.
Mm.
And by the time that Pat shows up and the project actually starts, I had already interviewed each person for hour and a half each minimum.
Mm.
Um, and I talked to them, before we even roll the camera. I never told them when I was going to roll the cameras. I would just
Yeah.
start chatting with them as the crew's setting everything up around us.
Okay.
And I would just chat with them about stuff. And I think a lot of these guys were initially worried that I was going to be looking down on them the way that the perception of how movie industry kind of Hollywood types might look down on
Yeah.
blue collar workers. And I did my best to make sure they knew that I wasn't looking down on them. I grew up kind of half and half in middle of nowhere, Maine, and the suburbs of Georgia. And um, in the
Okay.
town I'm from in Maine, most everybody's blue collar. So all my friends were blue collar. And, I grew up hunting and fishing and camping and doing things that, a lot of these guys would have grown up doing, and
Right.
letting them know that I wasn't here to judge them and look down on them for their culture and how they grew up and what they do, I think helped a lot and
Okay.
made them feel like they weren't being kind of lampooned the way that maybe they might perceive another filmmaker might have done.
Right.
Uh, so having those long conversations with them beforehand and talking to them about things they were interested in and whatnot. I think that helped a lot in the interviews.
Okay.
Um, and I made Lowe and Cole agree that no one could get fired, no matter how ridiculous they were.
Okay.
Um, because I didn't want them to feel like their boss was going to fire them for saying that they didn't like the boat.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
so they agreed. They're like, hey, if these guys say that you guys suck and they don't like you and whatever, you can't fire them. And they agreed. But then everybody actually pretty much likes those guys.
Yeah.
Um, it was, so it wasn't particularly hard. They're actually, I mean, Lowe's a super nice guy.
Yeah.
Um, you know, for all the looking down that Hollywood would give on a Lowe Porter type person, he's way
Mhm.
better to his employees than any studio I've worked for.
Okay. Yeah.
We
Cole
don't give any
seems.
time off.
Yeah. Cole seems incredibly likable, and Lowe
Yeah.
seems like a hard ass. But it all seems to come from a place of. I mean, he's obviously very knowledgeable about everything that's going on in his shop, and he's been successful. And you do the backstory talking about he's gone out of his way to make sure that his employees have things that most others don't. Um,
Yeah.
so you do a very good job of framing that character throughout because he comes off as a hard ass. He comes off as kind of a dick from time to time, and I think it's important to see that juxtaposition throughout.
Yeah. I mean, he is a hard ass and he
Yeah,
is a dick from time to time. And he and his son have a tough relationship because of it.
yeah,
But at the same time, I mean, Lowe's a man of principle and he follows his principles pretty well and they're pretty fair. So he might be a hard ass, but at the same time, he's very fair to
yeah,
everybody around him. So I think,
yeah.
you know, if you're consistent and fair, but a hard ass, at least, I think people can work with that.
Right, right. And I don't mean that negatively. I just think that like
Oh,
you said, he's a man of principles, and he knows exactly what he wants. He knows exactly what he expects, and he knows that these people are capable of
mhm.
pulling these things off, and he expects it to get done. So yeah,
Yeah.
nothing but appreciation and admiration for the things that he does on screen.
Yeah.
Um,
I thought it was great on camera. I really
yeah,
liked
yeah,
it. He did not want to be on camera either.
really,
Lowe did not want to be on camera.
wow,
He was tough. He did not. Cole wanted to be on camera. I think Cole likes the limelight a bit, but
yeah,
Lowe did not want it. Not at all.
interesting, very interesting.
Yep.
And then I mean, you mentioned that you made a deal with Lowe and Cole that employees couldn't be fired for the things that they said. Are there other ways that I hate to use the word manipulate, but any way that you manipulated the film or scripted it in a way that made it easier for you to film, easier for the people on set?
No, I really was careful not to lead people.
Mm,
I tried to let them talk as much as possible.
right.
I didn't do the thing like, hey, say this or blah blah blah. I'd worked on reality television a little bit, and I
Okay.
saw how they did things, and I didn't like that. I didn't want to do
Yeah.
that. So anything that they said was spontaneously what they said. I mean, I might
Okay.
ask them a question, um, and certainly I asked questions that I knew the answer to
Okay.
a lot of times, and but whatever they said is what they said.
Okay.
I tried not to lead them too much, just because I didn't want it to come off as disingenuous.
Right.
Um,
And then I mean, with any film, you're going to run into some bumps, and it's going to be challenging, and there's going to be things that come up that you don't expect. But I mean, you had to travel 200 miles with a boat that you weren't sure was going to make it to water. Um, what was the biggest challenge of that aspect of the film?
so one of the fun things is Jay and I are both stuntmen, and we both have extensive careers in stunt driving.
Mm,
Um, so all my camera vehicles were driven by stunt drivers.
okay.
Um, so that way I wasn't going to have to worry about the camera vehicles because we had three camera vehicles and each one was driven by a friend of mine that's a
Mm,
stunt driver. Like the guy who drove the main camera vehicle that I was in was like one of the main drivers on Talladega Nights.
okay.
You know, um, his name's Andy Martin. He's a fantastic stuntman. He was the first guy that ever gave me a day stunt coordinating on set.
That's cool.
It was a show he was coordinator on, and he let me cover one of the units. Um, but when you have guys like that driving for you, it eliminates so much of the problems
Hmm.
because they're smart, they're heads up, they're not going to get in car wrecks, they're not going to,
Right.
you just don't have to worry about them.
Right.
They're they're autonomous. It's like I don't have to sit around and micromanage any of it. I'm just like, hey Andy or hey Ashley or hey Eric, those are the three drivers, and be like,
Hmm.
hey, go do something, and they'll just go do it. Um, and then and then I had John Cooper. He was kind of corralling everybody. He's another stunt driver. And so it was just easy.
Okay.
That part was easy. Um, I would say the hardest part, honestly, in the moving was all the cameras, keeping all the GoPros running, just keeping
Yeah.
everything running. And then when something exciting would happen, because we couldn't afford a huge crew, so I had one sound guy, and we had a lot of those. Trying to think of what the name of those little sound packs were, but they each one they're really slick. I think they're by Tentacle,
Okay.
makes them, and each one keeps time code and records to its own internal SD, and they work for like 12 hours on a charge.
Oh, cool.
So we had a couple of those, and man, it would have been awesome to have like 20 of those because those things
Yeah.
were perfect because all of our cameras were time synced.
Okay.
We ran time code on everything. Um, but it would have been nice to have more of those because poor Nick, he was our sound guy, Nick Payne, and he had to, he'd be in car 3 and something would happen up near car 1, and we'd be like, Nick, get up here, and he's trying to. So that was tough, and then just trying to keep all those GoPros running. I mean, I think we had like 20 something GoPros going,
Yeah.
and we had a guy that was basically his job was to keep them all running, and that's really hard.
I'm
It's a
sure. Yeah.
lot,
Yeah.
especially when nobody involved as far as the on camera people, the on camera talent, so to speak.
Mm.
They're not, they're not professional film people. They don't know, like, oh look, the light's off. Maybe I should pull over real quick and have the GoPro guy come fix it.
Yeah.
They're not thinking that. They're just going about their lives. And
Right.
and the John, the guy who was driving the truck, John Aragoni, he's his mission is to drive the truck. Our documentary is not his mission.
Right.
So he's not just going to stop the truck every hour on the hour to let us adjust cameras.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
that was probably the hardest thing.
Okay.
Was just managing the GoPros and the sound.
Okay. And then I imagine on the flip side, while there's challenges, it has to be very gratifying to be able to bring a story like this to life. I mean, you in some ways, it seemed like by the end of the documentary, you sort of shifted Cole and Lowe's relationship, even if it's just a little bit. It seems to shift some in some way. I mean, you
Mhm.
managed to catch this incredible act of this boat again traveling 200 miles. You see this ridiculous thing of a boat being built in a warehouse nowhere near water, and it seems like the most ridiculous thing ever. So what about this film is the most rewarding and the most gratifying?
Um, I really enjoyed seeing the relationship between Cole and Lowe and how that developed. And
Hmm.
I like that we finally got a little bit of an attaboy out of Lowe for Cole because
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people have trouble getting their dad to ever acknowledge anything positive about them.
Hmm.
It's tough to get an attaboy out of your dad.
Yeah.
And so I was really excited to catch that moment because Cole doesn't get a lot of them.
Yeah.
Um, and I know during post, there was a few times where Cole was kind of mad at his dad about something, and he would see the moment where his dad, was pretty stoked about them getting the boat there. And, he's like, yeah, you did good. And then he's like, yeah, for the most part. But, he kind of mumbles that afterwards.
Right.
But it's still, that was really touching for Cole. And there were times where he would be like, man, I was really mad at my dad. But then I'd watch that section again and, be
Yeah.
like, well, maybe I'm not so mad at it. So I
Yeah.
thought that was really neat. To have kind of to have captured something that I think is pretty impactful to their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. You see Cole break down at the end, and you see how just that little thing at the very end is touching, and it really means the world to him. So that was very nice.
Yeah,
It was a great way to end the film, to effectively end the film. And while there's still some things that go on, during the credits, I feel like
yeah,
that was the best point to end on before leading into the credits. So
yeah.
worked very well. That has to be an incredible feeling to know that you played some role in that.
It was really fun.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so I want to know where other people will be able to watch this so that they can enjoy it and appreciate it as well.
I think it's on Amazon right now, iTunes. It's on the Google thing. It's on Apple TV. It's on pretty much all of them. It's pretty much every streaming service you can imagine, I think, has it now.
Cool.
The distributor is pretty good at that.
Yeah, that makes
Um,
life easy.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I mean, it's pretty easy to find.
good, good.
The if you know the name of it, it's hard to get organic um traction because you have to have like Amazon's their algorithm needs like a certain amount of reviews before it starts making people aware of it kind of
Okay.
organically. But
Well, I hope
yeah,
I hope this helps. Get some
that's okay.
views and yeah. And then so what are you working on now?
So I have a few scripts that I've written, and we're hoping to get funding. Um, the first kind of big hump as a filmmaker is to have a film.
Sure.
Um, so I'm hoping that will help. And then this being so far away from stunts, because I mean, obviously there are some stuntmen that have transitioned to director.
Hmm.
Um, they're and they're all really good guys. I've worked with all those guys. And they're, I think JJ's newest movie, the one with Jamie Foxx, the
Okay.
vampire movie.
Yeah,
Can't think
yeah,
of it, but
yeah.
he's kind of
I
the
know what you're
first
talking about.
stunt guy. I mean, it's an action movie, but it's action comedy, which I thought was pretty cool that a
Yeah,
stunt guy got an action comedy movie for his first film rather than a
yeah.
just a straight action movie,
Right.
which I thought was cool. And they've kind of paved the way, so I'm hoping it will be with having a film that's nowhere near, as far away from stunts as possible under
Yeah,
my belt. And then also having the stunt resume, I'm hoping that will help me get funding for a narrative movie that maybe isn't um, completely action based.
yeah. Well, best of luck. I hope it all works out. I look forward to seeing them when they do come out. Not if, but when. I'm sure they will happen. And then my favorite question at the end, what are some of your favorite films?
Oh, all right. So I would say Rashomon by Akira
Okay.
Kurosawa. Um, uh, Clockwork Orange by Stanley Kubrick.
Hmm.
Um, Fight Club by Fincher.
All right.
Um, I really liked. I love the Kill Bill movies, Tarantino's
Okay.
Kill Bill movies.
Yeah, yeah.
I try not to be too much of a Tarantino fanboy, but it's hard not to be. Um, Goodfellas, um, Apocalypse Now,
Mm,
Rambo First Blood. Actually, I really love that movie.
really? Okay.
Oh. Yeah, I think it's such a cool action movie. It's so it's a movie that like it's a good script, and you could just kind of you could do that movie for pretty cheap today. It's
Okay.
so restrained compared to modern action movies.
Oh yeah,
If
yeah.
you compare like the first Rambo movie to say John Wick,
Hmm.
um, John Wick kills more people in 5 minutes than Rambo killed in the whole movie.
Right.
Um, you know, it's very restrained by
Yeah,
modern
yeah.
standard. But yeah, I mean, and actually, I like David Lynch's Dune,
Okay.
which no one else. I don't meet anybody who ever likes that movie, but for whatever
I
reason, I
I
like.
I actually I enjoyed that film. I watched it for the first time last year, just before the reboot, the remake was
Oh,
done, and so I checked it out, and I think it's as good, maybe better than the reboot. I mean, considering financial restraints compared to what he would have had available today, I think it's fantastically done.
yeah, yeah, I really liked it, And I like the fact that there's no lasers in it, unlike the new movie,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
really bothered the lasers. The
Yeah.
laser scene really bothered me. I don't know if you've read the books,
I have
but
not.
so the shields they have use a thing called a Holtzman generator, I believe is what
Okay.
it's called. And the whole premise of the story is, they had these things called the Machine Crusades at one point,
Mm,
and they had to fight off the AI. That's why there's no thinking machines in the Dune universe. That's why
okay.
they have mentats and whatnot. And but the Holtzman device, which is what powers the shields and allows them to fold space, if you shoot a laser at it, you can basically blow up the solar system with it.
Okay.
Um, and it's how they were able to defeat the machines, because AI would be pretty tough to fight. Um, you know, uh, in a battle of technological supremacy, it's tough to beat something that's way smarter than you.
Yeah.
But the Holtzman because they can shoot lasers, basically they could have kamikaze attacks where they would just laser an AI ship. That Holtzman generator would blow up and blow up that whole solar system, and they could just
Hmm.
move on. That's how they defeated the machines. And then in Villeneuve's Dune, they're using lasers to cut through a door, knowing that Paul has a personal shield device. And if that thing had been on and that laser had happened to clip it, it would have blown up the entire planet of Arrakis, thus ending all space travel.
Okay.
So it's just it was just like one of those moments where I was just like, frazzle, frazzle, and it was out. But other than that, I liked it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
You looking
that
forward to
one
the
moment.
next one?
I am, and I
Yeah.
like David Hughes movies. I love Sicario, so
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I'll give him a pass on that. I'm sure there was some studio exec that demanded it. I feel
Yeah.
like he read this material.
Right. But very good. And Nick, thank you again for taking the time to sit down with me. I know you said you're having a rough morning, but
Ah,
again, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time. I encourage
yeah,
everybody to check out the Ark of Lilburn. It's a fantastic documentary. Um, you can find it everywhere, and I'll post links for it in the video. So thanks again, and best of luck with everything, and have a fantastic day.
awesome. Thanks, man. You too.
Thank you. Thank you. See ya.
See ya.